On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, who should the Oklahoma City Thunder avoid in the playoffs? What improvements must they make down the stretch of this season? We'll talk about it all on today's show.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Right,
I am your host.
The intro's you, by the way. The intro,
What's up?
The keys and all that. I like that. That's you. That's real you.
Appreciate you interrupting the intro, but yeah, I get on the piano every now and then. No, that's not really me. But nonetheless, today's show, which Joel rudely interrupted, is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. It helps you find qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. No longer a secret on today's show. Joel Lorenzi, beat writer from the Oklahoman, here to break down the Thunder season thus far. Joel, outside of your usual interruptions, what's going on, man?
What's going on, brother? Good to be here, brother.
Great to see you, brother. Now, listen, this has been a crazy season. Your first season on the Thunder beat.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at this Thunder team, let's just jump right in. The great Joel Lorenzi, who I know, therefore I know the Thunder. When you look at this Thunder team, what's their ceiling?
That's a pod Easter egg, by the way. What's this team's ceiling? As far as this year, or like this era, or what are we talking about?
Firstly, let's just go very much in the micro of this season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, obviously they're barely until the postseason, right? I'd say second round is where I have them. Second round, maybe give a good fight in the second round. It's real situational matchups, all that. I mean, we can go on about the science and all that into it that comes with the matchups. But I would be comfortable saying in any setting, I think they are not only capable of winning a first round series in most cases, but also just pushing another team in the second round to the brink. So I'd say second round.
Second round would be a really good goal. That'd be their first ever playoff series win since Kevin Durant left. So that would be a huge milestone in and of itself. Now, you mentioned kind of this era. What do you think, given how good they already are, the assets that they have, you know, the pioneer of Sam Presti, what is the ceiling of this core of this era?
Yeah, I'd say a championship. I don't want to go too far and say multiple championships. This is not Jalen Brown sitting in front of Taylor Rooks, right? Let's just be comfortable, say a championship. That should be the bottom line. When you're this good, this early, got these level of pieces, I think nobody's stunned when you say it's a championship. Now, I'm not going to call them a dynasty. I'm not going to say they should be expected to win 3 or 4. But it wouldn't surprise me if they won more than one. And I think at the very least, they should win a championship, especially when you look at the decisions they'll have to make. I mean, I know, the aprons and everything that goes into now this next era of money in the league. Trust me, that these guys will be paying the price. They're not going to cut costs or cut corners to keep from to keep the team, I don't know, financially like stable or like afoot. Like that's the priority when you're a small market team, is to keep what you have, because you don't know, you'll probably never look into what you have in Dub and Chet in that succession again. So I expect this team to be contending for championships very soon.
Yeah, and I think that the Thunder are lucky enough to have already struck twice, and it's going to be difficult to do it a third time. You got KD, Russ, and Harden. Now you've got, you've traded for Shea, you've got Chet and J-Dub, of course, in the same draft. You've got to capitalize on this. And I think that where the Thunder are set up in the future is that they have enough first-round assets, not even to go make a splashy trade, but to fill out the roster at a cost control way, either by drafting very well, as we've seen them do with Case and Wallace and other guys who can be complementary pieces, or just by simply trading them for just cheap veterans, but keeping the cost down on the margins while maintaining, Shea's going to be a supermax guy. He's already eligible for that as long as he makes All-NBA this year, which he will. So, you're going to extend him, going to extend J-Dub and Chet. So keeping the cost down in that way, the Thunder have really set themselves up well to do that. And as someone who just kind of jumped in to the funnest part of what this Thunder rebuild has been with a fresh perspective, like to you, what's been the most surprising or interesting part about now following this team so intimately?
The most surprising, probably just how many wins a few of these young guys have been worth. I mean, there's surprises all across the roster, but like Chet being as impactful as he has, and like I'm sure we'll get into this later in the show, but part of the MVP argument and just the overall framework of this team, I think an argument against Shea is just how good Chet has been, just how much he's meant. I mean, that dude is worth like however many wins. Like you can see the impact, even when he's not, when the scoring production maybe isn't there, like just the overall ability to be an anchor. Like he's been worth a lot of wins. And then Dub has been, I mean, he has people calling him, an all-star by next year, a future all-NBA guy. Like people see stars when they see that dude. And so just how good those two have been this early. And then you got guys like Isaiah Joe who is surprisingly, really, really surprisingly good for his contract. Cason Wallace has been, I mean, it hasn't been talked about enough because we're in this, unprecedented rookie race with these incredible dudes. But Cason Wallace has been one of the best rookies in the league and has been like an impactful, like you saw the other night, a late game closer as a 20-year-old. So there's been surprises all across this roster, honestly.
Yeah, it's been surprising up and down. And I think that, Isaiah Joe taking the next step to be an all-around player has been something that has tied this roster together. You can get lost in the top of the roster, but things like that have helped them become as good as they've become so far. When you look at this team, one thing that I've been torn with is that coming into the year, I was just all in on the fact that I do believe that, you have to go through some things. You have to get some battle scars in the postseason. And it's going to be even more difficult in this Western Conference because I think it's the most competitive, most interesting Western Conference or any conference we've seen in quite some time. But also, while that's all true, the Thunder have done a great job of just showing this uncommon poise and maturity where you're not thinking that they're just going to fall off a cliff because the calendar flips to April. So where do you land on balancing the need for postseason experience, the need to go through things with your core, and this team's also just incredibly good right now?
Yeah, I think the problem would be if their experience had a lot to do with their play style. Like their play style, if that was really, like, I don't know. I mean, you can say that, because they play so fast, like that is their experience, their age, let's say, that has more to do with their age than anything. But experience, I don't know. Experience comes into coverages, how you deal with a guy over the course of a series, adjustments. And that part, like, and Dagnall's hands and just some of how wise these guys have been in certain situations, how much basketball a guy like Shea watches, I would be less worried about that part. But of course, you still, like, if you're asked like to put IQ for IQ with like LeBron in a series or something like that, then obviously you're like, that's a factor in a series. But overall, I think there's a good faction of people in the NBA world that have kind of played up to a fault, just the whole experience bit, but they do need experience. And that's why I wouldn't put them maybe past the second round. There are teams with experience, with similar talent that will just probably edge them out because of experience. So that's why I have their ceiling where it is, but I don't think it makes them like a first round out or something like that.
Yeah, I am uncharacteristically bought into this team despite their age, just because, you can see from the players aspect, they've been tested and they've handled adversity well this season whenever it arose. I really do believe in this coaching staff. I think that the coaching staff thing, you're never going to come around to coach nationally until they do it in the playoffs. But everything that Mark's done since becoming the coach of Oklahoma City, and even whenever the team just had no quality, not enough quality players on it, he was able to make them competitive and able to make them a team that fought every single night. Even though they lost a lot and only won 23, 24 games, they still fought and competed each night because of some of the principles that he laid in there. So I do believe in a coaching battle. Like, for example, you get the Mavericks out of the play-in tournament, I'd give the coaching battle wholeheartedly to Mark, even though Jason Kidd's gone to the Western Conference Finals with Dallas. And so things like that add up over the course of time. So this season, I think that a good goal is the first round. And anything past the first round, you are looking at and you are just thrilled that it's happening and just kind of thrilled with the ride it's going on. But this team is going to gain that experience. And then from there, we can both agree the sky is pretty much the limit for this Thunder roster and for this Thunder core because of all the moves that they can start to make over the course of it. But we're going to make some moves moving into the postseason, talking about some key adjustments and some key improvements this Thunder team can make. Despite being 47-20, there still are some eligible improvements to make. But coming up, we'll talk about that. Now, first, let's talk about our good friends over at Stitch Fix. Stitch Fix is great. Check them out today, stitchfix.com. And when you do, they're going to help you out. Joel, you can use a wardrobe improvement at times. They're going to have an instant boost to your confidence and pick you out some on-trend outfits that help you feel more confident and look better. They have everything that you want in your style, size, budget, and they're going to help you get stylish, be true to yourself, but also keep up with the times. And so they're going to send you this box of 5 pieces. You can keep all 5. You can mix and match and say, I only want 3 of these, and then send the rest back for free. It's awesome, and it's a great way to refresh your wardrobe at Stitch Fix. Go there right now to stitchfix.com/lockdown. That's stitchfix.com/lockdown. Style that matters and makes you feel good and makes you feel as good as you look. Go there right now and get started at stitchfix.com/lockdown. Stitchfix.com/lockdown. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Joel Lorenzi of the Oklahoman checking it out. Joel, it's playoff time almost. Can't skip past the 15 games, whatever, but we can. The team can't, we can. What is an area of improvement, or what is a concern for you heading into the postseason for the Thunder?
We're talking about the P word, huh? The word they don't like to use.
Last I checked, Joel, there's no law against it. Now there might be internal laws with the Thunder, but we're not a part of that. So
trust me, I go by my own laws, brother. But
too much oftentimes, as I've told you before.
What am I worried about for the Thunder for the postseason? That was your question, right?
Right.
What am I worried about? I am worried about this is something I haven't really, my ears hadn't perked up about it until maybe these past couple weeks, because I think there were a couple games like this. And granted, like I think the Indiana game was one of these. I don't know how many teams have played like that. They also missed J-Dub badly in that game. But Indiana, and Indiana does it to a lot of teams, but Indiana outran them. Indiana obviously outscored them. That's Indiana's MO, but I just thought, how little the Thunder got in transition, like seeing that alternate reality, which is something we haven't seen. I mean, Mark has always talked about, the defense is going to be aggressive. They're not necessarily looking to force turnovers, but it just kind of happens with the way they play. That is a maybe not frightening, but it's maybe a concerning reality, when if the game was to slow down, they don't start first turnovers, because it is so much of what they do, right? And I know, like, playoff basketball is a completely different game. It slows down. It looks different. And so I wonder if they can be that outlier that can rely so heavily on that. And granted, this team is talented enough to maybe squeeze by or live off so many other facets of the game. But that is such a big part of what they do, no?
No, yeah. And I think that it is a volatile part of what they do. Some of it is, of course, induced by the Thunder. Some of it is just the Thunder playing an abnormal level of aggression in every single night, whereas in the NBA, most nights you're going to see teams take nights off and possessions off and be too careless. In the playoffs, everyone's treating every possession like it's the end of the world. You see the pace of the playoffs slow down. You see it become more of a half-court game. And so obviously that can change things and really change things for a team that wants to go out there and run. I think that the Thunder, where they can kind of make up for that, is that it might not be the 20 turnover games, but making up for it in big moments and using their length to their advantage. Because even if you shrink the court and play half court and don't get out and run, there's still going to be opportunities for you to disrupt possessions. And even if you don't come up with steals, even if it's just 2 deflections in a 24-second shot clock, you get 2 deflections and the ball's ping-ponging around, you're not going to get a quality shot off most of the time against this athletic of a defense in OKC. So it might not look like turnovers and fast break, but it can still stay true to their identity even in the half court by just causing chaos. And I think that they'll do that. But that is a huge kind of point that can fluctuate from what we're typically seeing night in and night out in OKC.
Yeah, and you mentioned, okay, so let me ask you this, because you mentioned just them finishing with length. Obviously, Dub has been great at that. They've had guys that have, used that to their advantage. Where do you see, how do you see the fate of the half-court offense, just for the starters specifically, faring in the postseason? Giddey's been getting to that push shot recently. He's looked different in weeks past than he had to start the year, throughout the course of the year. Just how do you see the starters holding up in terms of half-court offense and maybe being able to offset some of that stuff we talked about?
Yeah, it's going to come down to in the half-court offense, for me, player movement. Just if whenever you're watching the Thunder, whenever they get to their secondary action is often whenever they're the best, because this team is so versatile, and like 1 through 5, they can dribble, they can drive, and they can play on the ball. And so if you're going 1-2 actions deep and you're keeping the defense on their heels, they're trying to switch and cross match and get recovered. All that time that they're playing on their heels, you have enough killers like J-Dub and Shea who can just rise up and take advantage of any crease that you give them. So it's going to take a lot of just movement, and you can't be very stagnant at all. And it's going to take Josh Giddey making very quick decisions. And in the games which he's done that, even whenever they're playing off of him, in the games in where he's made quick decisions, he's gone hard to the basket, like those have been really quality games for the Thunder. What encourages me from what we've seen this season is that the Thunder have not been shy. Even last year, whenever they were 2 games under 500 and they didn't have as quality of players to replace him with, the Thunder have not been shy about not closing with Josh Giddey or getting a new look in there. So that helps as well. But ultimately, I think that Josh Giddey has shown over these last 2 weeks that this can work with this starting 5, and with Josh Giddey being more decisive and driving into that space will be huge. The only matchup that concerns me for the Thunder is that there's not much Josh Giddey can do against an elite rim protector. So if you have an elite guy down there, it just comes down to making or missing threes, and that's unfair to Josh Giddey to put him in that spot of just camping in the corner and hitting or missing threes. Now, if you have a rim protector who might be a little soft down there, or who you can draw out of the paint, especially with Chet Holmgren, then you can work around that, as we've seen. That's why Josh was really good against Memphis. He was good against Toronto. He was good against these teams that weren't Kristaps Porzingis, luckily plays out east, and some of these other elite shot blockers. So it's going to come down to all those factors, but I think that they're factors that the Thunder can work around.
Yeah, and maybe we'll wait to the end of the show this, but I think you got a name in mind, right? The ultimate kryptonite, because I have a name in mind.
What's your name in mind?
Anthony Davis.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
That's the team that everybody's throwing around right after. That's the only team that's won the season series with them. When him and Braun are on, I mean, it's very I don't know, it's easy to say that, but AD has been a tear against them. And like even like Sabonis, like the matchups like that are like Sabonis is a different player, right? He's not the same rim protector. But I think on the other end, like when they have to deal with like a guy that just completely thwarts their actions or the way they operate, like when Sabonis in the DHO thwarts the way they operate. Now they won the last game they played, but those first 2 games in Sacramento, that dude had a ball, man. Like just the DHO, just the freedom, if Kevin Huerter's coming off, like the amount of space he earns them. It's a problem. There are problematic matches for them, and they're almost all big men, I'd say.
It's interesting. I'd be way more afraid, so to say, of the Lakers if I was the Thunder than the Kings, because with the Kings, I would trust the ability of Mark to strategize and in the course of a 7-game series take enough away to win that game against the Kings, who have not been tight down the stretch of games, who have not executed very well night in and night out, to where you could take advantage of them, especially defensively. And then I think that against the Kings, another thing that works out is playing J-Will with Chet. Like you've seen that at times whenever J-Will's in there with Chet against Sabonis, he can kind of hold up Sabonis whenever Chet rotates over and gets a block, for example. So those things can help. And now against the Lakers, there's not very many adjustments to make. It's going to come down to complementary players hitting threes. But the thing is, the Lakers are so talented against the Thunder specifically. This is where I think that sometimes Thunder fans might be a little annoyed because it's the Lakers branding of you just feel like the Lakers every year are shoved down your throat. But for the Thunder specifically, the Lakers are big enough and they're long enough to muddy up the mid-range and take that away as much as you can from a guy like Shea, a guy like J-Dub, while also spraying out to Wiggins and Wallace and Joe and everyone else who you want shooting threes, and having an elite rim protector on the back end of all that. So that's where the Lakers matchup is just incredibly frightening. It's not to say the Thunder can't beat the Lakers. I think I'd still pick the Thunder in a tight 7-game series if they presented the Lakers, but that's who I think has the best chance of the immediate opponents to beat Oklahoma City for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So are we doing this now, or are we just saying the teams that we think?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's go to who would you avoid in the playoffs?
I want to clear up then Sacramento is not one of those teams to me. I think they beat them in a series, but I just think of individual matchups they had trouble with. I think Sabonis falls in there, just in terms of individuals, somebody who really forces them to kind of change what they do at times. Obviously AD is the biggest. Just we talk about just him being an anchor, but inside, like how many second chances he gives those guys, at least at pivotal moments throughout the course of a game, how much he changes the pace of a game with trips to the free throw line. Just the overall way he plays against them, it creates some pockets of the game that they've had trouble with. And then you talk about just the complimentary players hitting threes. These are not the Lakers of past that can't shoot, man. Like that are bottom. Like when they played them last, I don't know what they are now, but they were 13th in the league in 3-point efficiency. That's something you have to defend, right? And so that's a problem. That's role players hitting shots. That's D'Lo hitting circus, absolutely nutty shots. Stuff that can translate to the playoffs. So like I'm just echoing everything you said. The shot making is there for them.
And that's while barely mentioning LeBron James.
Yeah.
In one of what has to be assumed one of his last great seasons. Obviously, he's been defying the odds his whole career, but like, how many more seasons can he play at this much of a level where come playoff time, you would expect him and AD can really put the team on their back if they're just getting something from their role players. They just need enough, not to mention that fluky night that they got a couple weeks ago where they were just hitting everything.
Yeah. And so we look at that 7 through 10 range. Where do you rank those teams in terms of threat?
For the Lakers, I would say number one of the immediate future teams. Now, of course, Denver is my number one overall, but you worry about Denver well down the line. You're going to be on the opposite side of the bracket of them. Who cares? Lakers would be number one of my potential first-round matchups for the Thunder. What are your thoughts on this one? Dallas is my number two. Now, this is why. I think we've seen Luka Doncic every time he's been in the playoffs. We've seen him by himself take off 2 games at least by himself. Mm-hmm. So you give him 2 games, the Mavericks have to win 2 more. You're going to give them another game, you would imagine, that we've seen over the course of this season's series with the Mavericks, and we've seen over the Mavericks season so far. They're bound to have a game in a 7-game stretch where their role players cannot miss. That's now up to 3 games. We haven't even talked about Kyrie and what he can do and his big shot creating. So if they get into a tight game, they have 2 guys who can hit massive shots. So do the Thunder, by the way. But Kyrie's done it in the NBA Finals. Luka's done it in the NBA playoffs. So like I would be worried about the Mavericks. Where I would circle back on Dallas would be I think that the Thunder have the distinct coaching advantage. I think if you don't get those games from the Mavericks role players and find a way to shut them down, then they're fighting an uphill battle pretty significantly. And Dallas will have to play either 1 or 2 games to get to this point of playing the Thunder. And, you know, they have been an inconsistent team all year long. So their inconsistencies might end up costing them. But I think that they're a sneaky bad matchup.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think they're number 2, mostly because my Warriors faith just isn't what it is. The golden touch isn't there anymore. But Dallas, like you said, like I thought on paper and rotationally, they got better at the deadline. It maybe hasn't translated the way. I haven't looked as close to see why it hasn't translated. Obviously, the inconsistencies, like you mentioned, play a part of that. But look at their big rotation. Gafford and Lively is tough. That's a tough swap. That's all game long. You're dealing with one of those two. So you're giving Luka a lob threat at all times. You think of Kyrie as a guy that can close a game for you, win a game for you. We saw that in Denver the other day. They can win a game for you. And then Luka, I mean, the resume speaks for itself, right? Probably the best playoff performer under 26. Do we even need
I don't think we even need a caveat. Like he's just one of the best playoff performers we've ever seen.
Yeah, and so I say this all the time, and I won't get into the whole Shea Luka thing, but the reason Luka is so great is, to me, in terms of like we always talk down on like heliocentric basketball, right? That dude is like the last hope for heliocentric basketball. I think of that Western Conference Finals run, and I'm gonna hold on to this Western Conference Finals run forever. I think of that Western Conference Finals run, and I genuinely felt flashes of what Bron did in Cleveland the first time around. There's just never been, not never, we haven't seen in a long time a guy that can single-handedly will a team so far into the playoffs do what he does, hit the shots he hits, run an offense the way he does. And so, yeah, I'll always be for I think you look at some of his losses in the first round, they're like Clippers teams like having to knock him off, like
Clippers teams having to just fight, scratch, and claw with Paul George and Kawhi, having to try to contain him.
Exactly. And so now you give him what feels like his best, player to the end of the bench, like supporting cast he's had. And I'd be fearful. I mean, when they can really lock in, because like inconsistency is still a thing with them. When they can really lock in, when they're hitting shots, when their actions are tough to beat, when they're I think back to the game they beat the Thunder by 30 plus. When the defense is there, when everything's hidden for them, and I'd say maybe they play a game and a half exactly like how they played that game against the Thunder. That's worth maybe 2 wins right there. And so, dude, we're having to go game by game, tallying how they fare. So I'd agree they're probably second in that order.
And I think that we can really nerd out about this matchup if it happened. But the one thing that would concern me is that the playoffs are a pick and roll game, and you run pick and roll nearly every play in the playoffs, and it's like that in the regular season too, but especially in the playoffs. Luka's in the 91st percentile in pick and roll. Kyrie's in the 80th percentile pick and roll. And the reason why is that you look at Chet, for example. There were some plays against Dallas last week where Gatford got some easy dunks and people wanted to pin that on Chet. But Chet's having to shade over to take away Kyrie. And if Luka was healthy, take away Luka, who is a much more bigger threat. Now you're a step behind whoever the rolling big man is. So they're just getting spoon-fed these buckets and at times and ones because you're a step behind, which – at the same time, you can't really discredit Chet for doing that because the much larger threat is going to be one of those 2 ball handlers. And the Thunder would have to find a way to help on the weak side rotation to take away that big. It would just present a really messy matchup, I think. And I would just not enjoy that in the sense of it would be a very stressful series for Thunder fans. Yeah. And it'd be very fun, though. I think that it would go the distance. And I would still, even as we're talking about all the worrisomes, I would still pick the Thunder in that series.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I'm envisioning what you're describing now, and I think back to like when they open that game, like Chet is in like a drop, and Kyrie's just like pulling up, moving threes. Like that's the shot making that's going to be in the playoffs, and that's like when he's like in the drop you start the game with, right? This is not like we're not talking about him hedging yet. We're not talking about like who if he is guarding. Let's say, I don't know. I mean, Mark has the adjustments, but like, let's say that backside rotation guy is like Lou. Like, is Lou prepared to do that for an entire series? Having to be the guy that has to tag Gafford.
If he's got a tag, then who are you keeping on Luka and Kyrie nonstop? Like, who are you going to use as kind of a purple tag on them? Just death by that matchup. You want them to fight over every screen. And where do you put Lou? I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff that we're going to get into. We are very nerdy about this stuff, so we can nerd out about it if and when it happens. I have a tinfoil hat idea about defending the Mavericks that we'll tease for our future playoff preview pod. But coming up, let's talk about the rest of the season. What should you watch for the next 15 games? I know that everyone's itching for the playoffs, but why are these games so important? But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at LinkedIn, folks. Go to LinkedIn right now, because if you're hiring for your small business, you're going to want to find a qualified professional that's right for your role very, very quickly. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. That's LinkedIn Jobs with the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. Go there right now. LinkedIn is not just another job board. In fact, LinkedIn is a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals that you cannot find anywhere else. LinkedIn does it all while making the process easy and intuitive. So hiring is easy when you have this many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats. Therefore, you don't have the time or the resources to hire out and have a long hiring process. That's why LinkedIn is consistently finding ways to make the process easier, and they've launched a new feature that helps you with a job description. That way the process is quicker for you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Check them out today by posting your job for free. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm Rylan Stiles, with me, the Oklahoman beat writer, Joel Lorenzi. Joel, I know that we're just itching for the postseason. Still 15 games to be played. What are you watching for in these next 15?
Yeah, obviously a tough stretch, right? Just finishing it out with the same complexion as, the first, I'm bad at math, however, 60 plus games, similar complexion. These are they legitimately, I don't know what it's ranked, but they have one of the tougher finishing schedules off the eye test in the league, man. I mean, you got the East Coast trip, you got upcoming, I think Sacramento is in there somewhere. Maybe that's the back 4 home games. Is that it? You got the Spurs in there. I mean, I know the Spurs are what they are, but they managed to beat the Thunder last time they played. You got the Bucks
Boston's in there. It's interesting. As long as everybody plays, it's going to be interesting because you got Milwaukee twice. You've got Boston. You've got the Pelicans, who are playing good basketball right now. You've got the Pacers again, the Kings, the Mavericks in the season, which could be huge for both sides at the end of the day. Mavericks could be fighting for playoff/play-in positioning. Thunder could still be fighting for the 1 seed. So it's going to be a stretch where you want to race to the end, but you also can learn some very valuable things. Like if that Mavericks game is, in fact, a game where everybody plays for both sides, that is a huge data point for the Thunder, because the Thunder, after that game, will have an entire week off, whereas the Mavericks will have to go through the play-in tournament in all likelihood. And with that being said, if the Mavericks are going through the play-in tournament and play the Thunder have a whole week to react to that Sunday game and have another data point of solely focusing on an opponent that can really help them on the front end of that series, and especially capitalize on what projects to be a great home court advantage in games 1 and 2.
Yeah, and that's what we missed with this last game. I mean, as great as Kyrie was, as much as the Mavs still were able to keep that game competitive for so long, we still miss Luka, who tends to give the Thunder hell. And so that was the data we were missing. But I am excited to see just how to react to the Bucks and Giannis, man. Like, Giannis is one of those players you just want to see the stress test from them, how they react to him. I mean, we talked about what rim protectors look like. I know he's probably he's more help side than AD is, but it'll just be fun. And then they have Brook Lopez there, of course, still. Like Brook Lopez, hey, we can't discount Brook Lopez. So it'll just be fun to see them, especially how different Milwaukee's defense is since the break. Just a different complexion they've had. It's incredible. I mean, this is NBA scheduling, and they haven't played the Bucks at all. Down to the last 15 games, they're going to play them twice. So that's probably what I'm looking forward to most.
And that Celtics game, the Celtics on their home court have been incredible. The game in December was awesome. Is there a question that has to be answered in these next 15 games heading into the playoffs?
A question that has to be answered? Honestly, man, I think there's still yes. Okay, I was gonna say no, because I think so many of the questions that remain have to be answered in the postseason. But I think smaller things I would be looking for, how Gordon Hayward still settles into these next few weeks. I think there's still a runway there for him to get closer to the player. I mean, they won't say the player they envisioned when they brought him on, but I imagine they had an idea. Otherwise, they wouldn't have brought him on. And of course, I know the move cleared up cap space, whatever. But I imagine they still wanted him to be part of the playoff rotation. That could still be very possible. We've seen him start a game already. I don't know if that'll even be a thing in the playoffs, but this is clearly a player they want to see come along with this team. This is a player that even Mark and I think Gordon has talked about this some too, but not as extensively as Mark. This is a guy that is jumping into he came from a young team. He's with a young team now, but the difference is that this young team is actually headed towards something, right? Like they're potentially first in the West. That's something you just can't go hit first into. And so he's been very conscious. And this has been evident in just the way he played in terms of, how he wants to fit into the offense, what he's giving, what he's taking away, because everything is an additive, even if you are a floor spacer. Now, he's been great in that aspect in terms of being a spacer, giving that in lineups, giving that gravity, even if it doesn't necessarily translate to points. He's been aggressive in terms of, playmaking recently, just racking up assists. But I think striking that balance between when to, pull the catch and shoots, because he has looked a few of those off, when to, get to your one dribble pull up, when to get to some of the stuff that I think has made him like the complete idea of him versus, just still trying to fit in, which like that's not an easy or quick process. But I think that's something to watch for in the next few weeks, because that's all they have if he's going to be who they want him to be in this run. And then my other thing would be Josh Giddey just furthering some of the actions that have, helped him be this different kind of player, have this different imprint on the game, be more impactful inside and at the rim. We've talked about just the short roll stuff, the screening, the ball screening, the backside cuts, like what progression that stuff takes, what wrinkles might get added before the end of the season. That's all I'm watching for.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Giddey has found his role, I think. I think that his role is this 19 to 22-minute window, and in that window, you've got to be engaged defensively, and with that activity comes deflections and steals, and it helps the Thunder turn defense into offense, which allows him to thrive offensively. And it's being more active and not just sitting in the corner. Part of that, I believe, should not be fully placed on Josh Giddey. Part of that is just getting him involved in the offense from a strategic standpoint, but still get more involved in the offense with as a cutter, as a screener, and things of that nature. All those things he's done the last 2 weeks and done at a high level. Even in that game against Dallas, where he gets sat down for the majority of the second half, I thought Josh Giddey up until that point had played a good game. It was the fact that Dallas chose to just ignore him at such a blatant level that you had to make life easier. But up until that point, whenever they were only ignoring him at a somewhat level, he was playing really well. So like, just play your role the best you can. And I think that he's done that the last 2 weeks. And you're asking him for 19 minutes to be your fifth best defender and your fifth best player on the floor overall. He can do that. And the thing with him, though, is can you do that consistently? Because throughout this season, there's been pops here and there of him doing it. This last 2 week stretch has been the first time where you've seen it consistently this season. Can you build on that and take this through the end of the regular season, take this into the playoffs?
Yeah, no doubt. And, I think you're right about the window. And I think and it's crazy because Dallas is one of those more aggressive teams in terms of, gapping him, really sinking like almost under the rim on him. I think the Rockets are up there in terms of that level of aggressiveness. Everybody's not up there. There are some teams that are like, I've seen teams even in this latter half of the season that are like only within arm's length away from him, which is completely different from what Dallas does, right? So it'll be interesting to see just the different coverages he sees through the end of the year too, how they respond to those, how Milwaukee plays him, how Dallas plays him next time around, which I don't know how different that will be. But just the way teams play him, because that matters too, right?
Yeah, it for sure does. And to Josh's credit, I mean, as a young guy who's having to play away, he's never had to play before. He's done a good job of finding that role. Really, you're just looking for consistency. And to me, his version of consistency comes down to him just providing effort. And that's like the easiest thing, most controllable thing for a player to do. And as long as he does that, which I think he will, he'll be able to play this role pretty well. Obviously, you're going to be reliant upon Kaysen and Isaiah and Wiggins and these other guys too. But that's what I'm watching for, is not to have these big peaks and valleys from Josh Giddey that we've seen to this point in the season, have a more consistent level that we've seen the last 2 weeks.
In terms of effort, or
yeah, in terms of just engagement level defensively is the big thing. He has the frame that if he's engaged defensively, he can get deflections in the entry passes. He can mix it up on the glass and pull down a lot of rebounds for you and start the break the other way. He can get steals. He can do those things. So as long as he's engaged defensively, the rest of it kind of falls into place. And I think the Thunder are doing a better job of not putting him in the corner and just making him sit there as they did at the beginning of this whole process, using him more as a screener, using him on the ball some, and also using him as a guy that cuts behind the action and is able to benefit from some of these dump-off passes in the dunker spot that we've seen him get these last couple of weeks. So doing all of that for the last 15 games will go a long way in pushing this team toward, into the playoffs and on a good note.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the energy is a important thing. It's something you harp on a lot, but I do think like engagement only gets so far for him defensively. Like there's still some obviously like
he's not going to turn into Lou Dort at all, but he can turn into the fifth best defender on the court. And whenever you're the fifth best defender on this team, where you have all these other good defenders, it's going to be enough.
Sure, fair. I still think there are some obvious limitations there, which are gonna
Absolutely there are limitations.
leak into his window. I do think Case in some potential matchups and some potential games is gonna have to be a playoff riser. But I wouldn't doubt Case at all. I mean, he's like we talked about earlier in the show, he's been one of the more competent rookies. That dude is like a legit rotation guy on pretty much every team in the league, I think.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about this Josh Giddey role from the standpoint of like 19 minutes a game. Where I'm still leaning heavily on Case Wallace, still leaning heavily on Aaron Wiggins, especially, and of course Isaiah Joe. So like this glass half full Josh Giddey thing is still in the prism of 19 minutes or so. Because even when he's been playing well these last 2 weeks, that's all he's been getting anyway. Even as he's playing better, you would still prefer to close with other guys, frankly.
Mm-hmm. So where do you see Wiggs in the rotation? Because I know this was a big thing earlier in the season. I think back to like, what was that trip? The first week of the New Year, the Washington trip, where I think Wiggins had a great game, and people were like, well, why doesn't Mark play Wiggins more? And that was like the height of the whole experimentation thing. Like, what? Let's keep it firm here. Where do you see Wiggins' minutes, window, rotation spot, all that in the postseason?
Yeah, so I appreciate you never listening to the podcast, because everyone who listens knows that I love Aaron Wiggins, and I think that he should be a hallmark of the playoff rotation, because regardless of matchup, he can fit and be versatile defensively. He can cash in and be in the right spots offensively as a play finisher. Like, he should be playing more than 15 minutes a game, in my opinion, which is obviously something that Mark just has not agreed with to this point, which he knows more than we do. But for me, I've been very much a proponent of Wiggins, and dating back to Summer League of his rookie year, I've been saying that Wiggins is going to be a guy who has a lot of juice. I think that he still has juice and has proven that. He's just got to get the minutes to correlate with that. And I think that come playoff time, everything gets pushed out of the window besides winning. The goal is to just win no matter what. And he is going to be one of your best players and give you the best chance to win in a lot of matchups and a lot of games.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Mark has said it in between the lines since then, like just calling him, this pluggable player. That other guys are calling him a Swiss Army knife, which is like, these are teams you might hear guys throw around like in any basketball setting, college, high school, whatever. This is not like, these are not unheard of terms. But on this team, I don't know how many times these guys are just throwing that out willy nilly, but it's been thrown out a lot for him. Like, this is notable. I think Mark is on record saying he's as good of a system guy as they have. So it's like almost, it's dumb to think that like he'll lose minutes for like people. I know the height of that discussion was, oh, well, you didn't play Wiggs as much this night, but you played Lindy here 4 spot minutes. I don't see that stuff happening in the playoffs. I mean, obviously Lindy might play the end of a quarter like the other night, like for a half court set, you want some shooting in there. But like I'm so far into the belief that Wiggins is going to get the minutes he deserves, because this is a guy like this is another guy I think could be on a lot of playoff rotations. Man, I thought that was a guy that Phoenix has Royce O'Neal now, but I thought Phoenix would have killed for a guy like Aaron Wiggins, man. I mean, just that pluggable wing type. The shot making's been there. Just the switchability. He's not the craziest defender, but he's a good defender. Like, there's just so many qualities to him. I think people would be delusional. I mean, I'm not saying the Thunder. I don't think the Thunder go away from like experimenting in pockets. It won't be just to the degree they've seen in the regular season. But I think Wiggins is less on the experiment side and more on the firm rotation side.
Yeah, and that's where I have to keep clinging to hope of, like, to me, Wiggins has proven what he is, and that's not really going to change. He came in as an older college player. He is what he is at this point, which is an incredibly good role player, an incredibly good rotational piece. And so, needing to just cram minutes, down his throat for the regular season is not something that you have to do because he's a guy that stays ready. So come playoff time, though, he'll be ready, and I think that he should play. Like, he should be above the pecking order of a lot of guys on this roster. And you're right. I don't foresee like Lindy or anyone else getting minutes besides like maybe like Lindy is trusted by Mark. That's what might worry you, but he'll play like offense, defense type stuff and situational type stuff. He won't play he won't play true minutes to me.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
And he shouldn't at all. Like Lindy, bless his heart. But nonetheless, Joel, appreciate you joining us. What are you cooking up at the Oklahoman?
Can't say, brother. Good things. Good
FBI
things
over here.
Huh? FBI. You the FBI. You trying to dig into my records and stuff.
We can talk about your records off the air, but
yeah.
Appreciate you coming on. Go follow him at JX Lorenzi on Twitter. You have a lot of stands over there. But until tomorrow, be good and be good to